back to another video on the green malt. I'm Chris, and this is the third and final video of my Glengoyne trio. Yes, I'm still wearing a Sawdust City t-shirt. For those of you that watch the Glengoyne 12-year-old video. That's because I'm recording this back to back. I wanted to have the 12-year-old fresh in my mind when I tasted the 18 and talked about that one for comparison's sake, so going back to back. Did the 10, did the 12, skipping ahead 6 years to the 18. It's a big jump, and spoiler alert, the jump pays off. The 18 is magnificent, I think, and we'll get into why shortly, but it is light years ahead of its younger brethren, and I mean, that's to be expected. I would have dearly loved to have the 15 to gap that 6 years and just provide a more consistent progression through the Glengoyne library, but it seems to be my white whale and I wasn't able to do that. So let's talk 18. I won't get into the distillery too much because I've done that already, but like with the 12, I want to point out 3 relevant facts because it directly affects the product in the glass. The first is that this is a single malt Scotch whiskey from the Highlands region. The second is that they tout the slowness, in fact the slowest distillation process in the Scotch industry. And the third is that they use a very high quality variant of barley. In fact, only Glengoyne and Macallan use that particular variant. And they want to highlight that, so for that and other reasons, they don't use any peat at all when drying the grain, and it really allows them the cereal note to shine through. So that was something of note, the 12-year-old in particular. I think the cereal aspect of it plays less in the 18-year-old given the extra aging time, but it's still there and it's still important. Like all of Glengoyne's whiskeys, it's not colored, and the lighting is still terrible in here, but I think you can see the 18-year-old is a very rich, sort of dark, burnt umbery kind of orange color because it is an older sherry-aged whiskey. It's 43% in the bottle, and it is chill filtered. It's so nice on the nose. With the last video in the 12-year-old, I talked about the heat that came through. That was also 43% ABV. And like the tasting I did there, this just has a few drops of water in it. I poured it into the glass about 15 minutes ago before starting to record to give it a little bit of time to breathe. And there's no heat. There's no heat at all, and I'm thankful for it. I wouldn't expect it in an 18-year-old whiskey, but the richness is palpable compared to the younger versions of this. Just notes of dried fruit, red dried fruit, dark fruits, a little bit of orangey citrus. I talked about lemon in the past with the 12 and the 10, not so much here, much more orangey. Heavy chocolate notes too, just lovely rich chocolate. The cereal is still there, but unlike the younger versions, it's in the background. It's a secondary, it's a lovely secondary note, but it's still a secondary note. And then of course there's a little bit of vanilla, a little toffee. It's still a sweet nose. It's got a bit going on there, much more complexity. Like all of the Glengoyne products I've talked about, it's got a lovely weight to it. A little bit oily, a little bit viscous. Got some heft. I don't know if that is a result of the slow distillation process. Whatever it is, it's done very well. And like the nose, just super rich and lovely. Still sweet. Not nearly as sort of knock you in the teeth sweet as a 12-year-old, And even with the 12-year-old, as I said, I enjoyed it. I don't find the sweetness cloying. I don't find it overwhelming, but it's definitely a little bit of an inhibiting factor. Here, it's much more balanced out. Now, as I said on the nose, you get those fruit notes. It's those dried sherry fruit notes, maybe a little fig, uh, little prune, perhaps. Not quite the red cherry, dried red cherry. I don't think it goes that far. I think it is much more in the figgy prune area. A little bit of dried sultana type raisin note, and a little bit of citrus too. And as I said, it's not a, whereas in earlier, younger versions of it, it's much tartar on, to me anyway, leaning more towards lemon. This is more orange peel, and it's a little bit spicy, and that's, I think, one of the biggest factors behind the sweetness not being quite the overriding factor is the spice that is able to balance it and cut it a little bit. It's a little bit peppery. A little bit peppery. A little bit of nutmeg. Big chocolate note, always. The toffee is still there. And behind it all, again, is that nutty cereal note. Much harder to distinguish now. There's much more going on with this than there is the younger versions. But it's still there. It's still like the backbone of the whiskey. And the finish is just long, slightly spicy, a little bit of honey. The chocolate hangs on, that nuttiness is still there underneath. Whiskeys that I could spend all night just sipping, just smelling, being very obnoxious about things, and probably pulling out something slightly different every time. There's so much more complexity to this than there is to the younger releases. It's light years apart. And as I said, I know it's not a fair comparison to compare an 18 to a 12, and I don't mean this as a critique of the 12 or the 10. It's just more of an exercise in what to expect from a single distillery as they age their whiskey a little bit longer. I just, quite frankly, love this whiskey. It's just beautiful stuff. If you put a gun to my head and you asked me to choose one, not even one whiskey, one scotch out of my liquor cabinet, I don't think I could do it because I'm that indecisive. But this is definitely going to be in the contention for it. It would be a top three, yeah, top three for sure whiskey in my cabinet right now. And I had nothing but praise when I talked about the Blair Athol Cadenhead release way back when. This is not even in the same ballpark as far as flavor profile, as far as nature of whiskey. It's a totally different animal, but it is every bit as enjoyable to me. It's neck and neck with the Blair Athol for one of my favorites. It's not the kind of thing you probably want to be sipping on a hot summer day. It's very rich. It's very dense. It's a little bit sweet. But if it's not 30 degrees outside, I could be drinking this a dangerous amount. It's very smooth and just a wonderful, wonderful whiskey. So enough rambling. What's the score? I gave the 10-year-old an 80. I gave the 12-year-old an 83. The 18-year-old, it's just so much better. I think I would give it a 91 out of 100, and only because I'm not 100% sure that I like it more than the Blair Athol that I also gave 91 to. Depending on the day, I might give it a 92, 93, but I think 91 is a really good score. I think that makes a lot of sense for this one. What did I pay for the Glengoyne 18? I bought it about 6 months ago, and I paid somewhere close to $170, I think, for it, which is likely far more expensive than whatever markets you guys would be buying it in. But you know, sadly, I'm happy to do it here in Ontario. I think it's a great product, and relative to the prices we see here, I think it's worth the money. We definitely see inferior products of this age or younger in the same price point or higher. And that speaks volumes, I think, about where I am geographically and all that. But yeah, enough rambling. Glengoyne 18, best of the bunch. Definitely recommended if you can get your hands on a sample or a bottle, do it. That said, I do recommend the 12 as well. And the 10-year-old is a nice little whiskey in its own right. So, that little recap being done, I think I'm going to bid adieu to Glengoyne for the time being, and I'll be back next time with a whole new distillery.